It had been exactly 4 days since the Wu family laid their formidable matriarch to rest. The grief was still a heavy, quiet presence, but inside Sandy's small city apartment, a completely different kind of energy was brewing. It was the energy of a woman finally taking her life back. Sandy stood in the middle of her living room, her hands resting protectively over her pregnant stomach. Surrounding her was a sea of brown cardboard boxes. She was officially moving out. After the emotional breakthrough on Tay's balcony, she had not wasted a single second. She had waited for David to leave for another one of his weekend conferences, and she had immediately started packing. But she was not packing alone. Tay had refused to let her lift a single heavy object. He had shown up at her door at 8 in the morning, looking devastatingly handsome in a simple black t-shirt and dark jeans. But he had not come alone. He had brought his younger siblings, May and Ren. May was 20 years old, an absolute firecracker of a woman who had inherited Zaid's terrifying glare and Diane's flawless fashion sense. She was currently standing in the kitchen, aggressively tossing David's expensive, completely unused protein powder into a trash bag. Ren, who was 18 and the quiet, observant shadow of the family, was meticulously wrapping Sandy's delicate engineering tools in bubble wrap, working with the silent, deadly precision of a trained syndicate operative. "I cannot believe you lived with a man who buys white leather couches," May called out from the kitchen, tying the trash bag with a vicious knot. "White leather is a crime against humanity, Sandy. It has zero personality. It screams, 'I have a fake personality and I probably lie on my taxes.'" Sandy could not help but laugh, a bright, genuine sound that made Tay look up from the box of books he was taping shut. "David picked out all the furniture," Sandy explained, walking over to hand Tay another stack of engineering textbooks. "He said my taste was too cluttered." Tay's jaw tightened slightly, a brief, dangerous flash crossing his dark eyes, but he quickly masked it with a warm smile as he took the books from her. "Your taste is brilliant, and you are going to have complete creative control over the penthouse. If you want to paint the walls bright yellow and fill the living room with robot parts, I will personally buy the paint." Sandy felt a rush of pure warmth flood her chest. The contrast between David, who constantly criticized her, and Tay, who looked at her like she hung the moon, was staggering. She reached out, gently brushing a stray lock of dark hair from Tay's forehead. "Thank you, Tay. For everything. For bringing reinforcements." "We are not reinforcements. We are the demolition crew," May corrected, marching into the living room and dusting off her hands. She looked at Sandy's stomach, her fierce expression instantly melting into a puddle of absolute devotion. "Do you need water? Are your feet swelling? Do I need to massage your ankles? Granny told me to protect you and my future niece, and if you are even slightly uncomfortable, I will panic." "I am perfectly fine, May, I promise," Sandy smiled, touched by the younger girl's fierce protectiveness. "Just a little tired." "Sit," Ren said, speaking for the first time in an hour. He pointed a roll of packing tape at the only chair that had not been boxed up. It was a command, not a suggestion. Sandy dutifully sat down, letting the 3 Wu siblings handle the rest of her life's transition. It felt incredibly strange, yet deeply comforting, to be so thoroughly taken care of. For years, she had been the strong one, the one who held down a demanding engineering job, the one who cooked the meals, the one who silently absorbed David's neglect. Now, sitting in the middle of her half-empty apartment, she felt an immense, suffocating weight lifting off her shoulders. By noon, almost everything Sandy owned was packed and ready to be transported by the private moving crew Tay had hired. Ty was carrying the last heavy box toward the front door when the sound of a key turning in the lock made everyone freeze. The door swung open, and David walked in. He was wearing his usual expensive, tailored suit, a leather briefcase in one hand, and his phone in the other. He had supposedly been at a legal conference 300 miles away. He stopped dead in his tracks, his eyes sweeping over the boxes, the quiet, intimidating teenage boy holding packing tape, the furious-looking young woman glaring at him from the kitchen, and the massive, heavily tattooed man standing by the door. Finally, his eyes landed on Sandy, who was sitting quietly in the chair. "What is going on here?" David demanded, his voice rising in panic and anger. He dropped his briefcase on the floor. "Sandy, what are all these boxes? Who are these people in my apartment?" Sandy stood up slowly, her hands instinctively resting on her stomach. Her heart pounded. But when she glanced at Tay, who had stepped slightly in front of her like an impenetrable human shield, her fear vanished. She was not alone anymore. "I am leaving you, David," Sandy said, her voice remarkably calm and steady. "I am moving out." David let out a harsh, incredulous laugh, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "You are leaving? Are you out of your mind, Sandy? You are 6 months pregnant. You cannot just pack up and leave. We have a life together. You are acting completely irrational. It must be the pregnancy hormones making you crazy." May let out a sound that was half gasp, half growl, taking a threatening step forward. Ren casually reached into his pocket, his face completely blank. Tay simply raised a hand, a silent command for his siblings to stand down. He kept his dark, lethal gaze locked entirely on David, waiting for Sandy to handle her battle, but ready to tear the man apart if he took a single step too close. "I am not crazy, David," Sandy replied, lifting her chin. "I am finally seeing things clearly. You are never here. You do not ask about the baby. You do not care about my career. I am nothing but a convenience to you, a placeholder so you can pretend you have a stable personal life, to show off to the senior partners at your law firm." David's face flushed a deep, angry red. The smooth, polished lawyer facade completely dropped, revealing the ugly, selfish reality underneath. "You think this is about you?" David snapped, taking a step forward before freezing, as Tay's massive frame shifted slightly. David swallowed hard, addressing Sandy, but keeping his distance. "Do you have any idea what you are ruining? I am closing a deal on a massive house in the suburbs next month to impress the firm. I need your engineering salary on the mortgage application. You cannot leave now, Sandy. I will not qualify for the loan without your income." The room went dead silent. Sandy stared at the man she had spent 3 years of her life with. She felt a sickening twist in her stomach, but also an overwhelming wave of relief. The absolute truth was finally out. He did not care about losing her. He did not care about losing his unborn daughter. He only cared about his mortgage application and his precious career. It was the ultimate twist, the final, undeniable proof that she was making the right decision. "Well," Sandy said quietly, a cold, absolute finality in her voice. "I guess you will have to rent a smaller house, David, because my income, my daughter, and I are no longer your problem." David sneered, his ego completely bruised. He looked at Tay, trying to muster up some kind of pathetic alpha male dominance. "And who is this guy? You are leaving me for some tattooed thug? Good luck with that, Sandy. Let us see how long a guy like that sticks around when the baby starts crying." Tay did not yell. He did not raise his voice. He simply set the heavy cardboard box down on the floor with a soft thud. He walked slowly toward David, his footsteps completely silent. The sheer, overwhelming aura of the Wu Syndicate boss filled the small room, dropping the temperature by 10 degrees. David stumbled backward, his back hitting the front door. The smug sneer vanished from his face, replaced by absolute, primal terror. Tay stopped just inches away from David. He looked down at the lawyer, his dark eyes entirely devoid of mercy. "My name is Tay Wu," Tay said, his voice a low, terrifying rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. "And you are going to open that door, step out into the hallway, and wait quietly until we are finished removing what belongs to my family from this apartment. If you ever speak to her like that again, or if you ever try to contact her, I will buy your precious law firm, fire you, and personally ensure you never practice law in this country again. Do we understand each other?" David was trembling so violently he could barely nod. He scrambled for the door handle, ripped the door open, and practically ran down the hallway, leaving his expensive leather briefcase behind on the floor. May walked over and kicked the briefcase out into the hallway, slamming the door shut with a highly satisfying bang. "I really wanted to punch him," May complained, crossing her arms. "You took all the fun out of it, Tay." "Violence is messy, May," Ren noted quietly, picking up a roll of tape. "Psychological destruction is much more efficient." Sandy let out a shaky breath, pressing her hands to her face. The adrenaline was finally crashing, leaving her feeling exhausted but incredibly light. Tay was at her side in an instant. His terrifying aura vanished, replaced entirely by the gentle, devoted man who had held her while she cried on the balcony. "Are you okay?" Tay asked softly, his hands gently framing her face, his thumbs wiping away a stray tear of pure relief. I am sorry I had to threaten him. I promised myself I would let you handle it, but when he talked about using you for a mortgage, do not apologize, Sandy smiled, leaning into his warm palms. It was the most romantic thing anyone has ever done for me. Tay let out a low, breathy laugh, resting his forehead against hers. Let us go home, Sandy. An hour later, Sandy was stepping out of a private elevator and into Tay's spectacular penthouse suite. It was located in the heart of the city, taking up the entire top floor of a massive, modern glass building. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking, panoramic view of the Los Angeles skyline. Unlike David's cold, sterile white apartment, Tay's home was warm, inviting, and richly decorated. There were dark hardwood floors, massive, comfortable velvet sofas in deep jewel tones, and beautiful, thriving indoor plants scattered everywhere. It looked exactly like a place where a family was meant to live. This is beautiful, Tay, Sandy breathed, walking slowly into the massive living room. It is yours now, Tay said, walking up behind her and gently placing his hands on her waist. Whatever you want to change, just say the word. But there is one room I took the liberty of setting up beforehand. I hope you do not mind. He gently guided her down a wide hallway, stopping in front of a pair of heavy wooden doors. He pushed them open, and Sandy gasped. It was a nursery, but it was not just a standard, boring baby room. It was a masterpiece. The walls were painted a soft, soothing lavender color. In the center of the room was a beautiful, handcrafted dark wood crib. But the most spectacular part of the room was the ceiling. Tay had hired an artist to paint a highly detailed, scientifically accurate mural of the night sky, complete with glowing constellations and beautiful, swirling galaxies. In the corner of the room, there was a small, custom-built mechanical mobile hanging over a plush rocking chair, designed to look like tiny, intricate gears and cogs moving in perfect harmony. It was a tribute to her love for engineering. Tay, Sandy whispered, covering her mouth with her hands. Tears of absolute joy spilled over her cheeks. You did all of this? May picked out the crib, and Ren helped me install the mechanical mobile, Tay admitted, stepping into the room with her. But the ceiling was my idea. I want her to grow up knowing that the entire universe belongs to her. I want her to know she can build anything she wants. Sandy turned around and threw her arms around Tay's neck, hugging him as tightly as she possibly could. I love you, Sandy sobbed happily into his shoulder. It was the first time she had said the words out loud since they were reunited, but they felt so incredibly natural, like breathing after holding her breath for years. I love you so much, Tae-woo. Tay's arms wrapped securely around her, holding her and the baby close to his heart. He buried his face in her beautiful goddess braids, a profound, overwhelming sense of completeness washing over him. I have loved you since the moment you handed me that titanium gear, Sandy, Tay murmured, kissing the side of her head. Welcome home. As the afternoon sun cast a warm golden glow over the beautiful nursery, Tay and Sandy stood holding each other, completely ready to face whatever twists and turns the future held, as long as they were facing them together. 2 months had passed since Sandy left the sterile white apartment and the suffocating shadow of her ex-boyfriend behind. She was now 8 months pregnant, and the massive glass penthouse in the sky had truly become her ultimate sanctuary. The transformation in Sandy was nothing short of miraculous. The exhaustion and the quiet, heavy sadness that used to dim her brilliant eyes were completely gone. In their place was a radiant, undeniable glow. Tae-woo treated her like absolute royalty. Every single morning, before the sun even fully crested over the Los Angeles skyline, Tae was in the kitchen. He would blend nutrient-rich smoothies, prepare fresh fruit bowls, and quietly bring them into the master bedroom, waking her up with soft kisses to her forehead. He never complained about her late-night cravings, and he never made her feel like her pregnancy was an inconvenience. When her lower back ached from carrying the baby, his large, warm hands were always there, expertly massaging away the tension until she fell asleep against his chest. It was a Saturday afternoon, and the penthouse was currently filled with the chaotic, loving energy of the Wu siblings. May, Tae's fiery younger sister, was sitting cross-legged on the plush living room rug, surrounded by high-end shopping bags. She was holding up a tiny, ridiculously expensive leather jacket designed for an infant. May, she is going to be a newborn baby, not a motorcycle gang leader. Sandy laughed from the comfort of the velvet sofa, a cup of herbal tea resting on her round stomach. A Wu woman must establish her dominance early, Sandy, May stated entirely seriously, folding the tiny leather jacket and placing it neatly into a growing pile of designer clothes. I also bought her tiny sunglasses. If anyone at the playground tries to steal her toys, she will simply lower her shades and intimidate them. It is all about the aesthetic. Sitting at the dining table nearby, Ren let out a quiet scoff. The 18-year-old was surrounded by a mess of wires, a soldering iron, and a very sleek-looking camera lens. Fashion is irrelevant when it comes to infant security, Ren announced, not looking up from his intricate work. I have completely dismantled the standard baby monitor Tay bought. The encryption protocols were an absolute joke. Anyone with a basic laptop could have hacked into the feed. So, I am rebuilding it. It now runs on a closed, military-grade encrypted network. I also added a thermal imaging sensor. Tay walked into the living room carrying a plate of warm, freshly baked pastries. He set them down on the coffee table in front of Sandy before looking over at his younger brother. Ren, we live in a high-security penthouse with private elevator access and armed guards in the lobby, Tay pointed out gently, though there was a fond, amused smile on his handsome face. I do not think we need thermal imaging for the nursery. You can never be too careful, Ren muttered, adjusting his glasses and soldering another wire. I will not have my niece's nap schedule compromised. Sandy looked around the room, her heart swelling with an overwhelming amount of love. This was what a real family looked like. They were chaotic, slightly terrifying, and entirely devoted to one another. She had never felt so safe in her entire life. But exactly in that perfect, peaceful moment, the fragile bubble of their afternoon was pierced by the sharp ringing of Sandy's phone. Sandy picked it up from the coffee table. The caller ID showed Dr. Eris, the head of the engineering department at the robotics lab where she worked. Sandy frowned slightly. She had been on maternity leave for a week, and Dr. Eris promised not to bother her unless it was an absolute emergency. Hello, Dr. Eris, Sandy answered, putting the phone to her ear. Sandy, I am so sorry to call you on a weekend. Dr. Eris's voice came through the speaker, sounding incredibly stressed and deeply apologetic. But we have a major crisis at the lab. A legal crisis. The room instantly went quiet. May stopped organizing the baby clothes. Ren paused his soldering iron, and Tay's posture immediately shifted, his protective instincts flaring to life. He sat down on the sofa right next to Sandy, his dark eyes locked onto her face. What happened? Sandy asked, her voice tightening with sudden anxiety. We received a massive injunction order this morning, Dr. Eris explained, letting out a heavy sigh. Someone filed a lawsuit, claiming joint ownership of the patent for the pediatric robotic hand you designed. The lawsuit claims that because you were living with this person and sharing finances during the development phase, they are entitled to 50% of the intellectual property. Because of the legal dispute, the university board panicked. They completely froze our research grant. We cannot move forward with the clinical trials until this is resolved. Sandy felt the blood drain entirely from her face. The room spun slightly. Who filed the lawsuit, Dr. Eris? A lawyer, Dr. Eris replied, sounding disgusted. His name is David. I am so sorry, Sandy. I know he is your ex-partner. The legal department is trying to fight it, but he used his senior firm's resources to file an ironclad freeze on the assets. The board is talking about scrapping the project entirely to avoid the legal headache. Sandy could not breathe. The robotic hand was her life's work. It was designed specifically for children who had lost limbs. A project she had poured years of sweat, tears, and brilliant engineering into. And David, the man who had completely ignored her career for 3 years, the man who only cared about his mortgage applications, was destroying it purely out of spite. He was punishing her for leaving him. I will come down to the lab on Monday, Sandy whispered, her voice shaking violently. I will fix this, Dr. Eris. I promise. She hung up the phone and dropped her face into her hands, a choked sob escaping her lips. The crushing weight of the injustice felt entirely unbearable. Tay was instantly pulling her into his chest. He wrapped his strong arms securely around her shaking shoulders, pressing her against his heart. Sandy, look at me, Tay said, his voice a low, steady rumble that commanded absolute calm. He gently pulled her hands away from her face, wiping her tears with his thumbs. "Tell me exactly what that coward did." Sandy explained the phone call, her voice breaking as she talked about her frozen grant and the clinical trials being cancelled. She explained how David was claiming her intellectual property just to ruin her life. When she finished, the temperature in the penthouse felt like it had dropped below freezing. May was standing up, her hands balled into tight fists, her eyes blazing with absolute fury. "Give me 10 minutes, Tay. I know exactly where he lives. I will burn that white leather couch to the ground with him on it." "No fire, May," Ren said quietly. He had already closed his laptop and was rapidly typing on a secondary tablet, his fingers flying across the digital keyboard. "I am already pulling the financial records of his law firm. Give me 5 minutes and I will find every single tax evasion loophole they have used in the last decade." "Neither of you will do anything," Tay said, his voice smooth, terrifyingly calm, and completely devoid of emotion. It was the exact tone his father, Zaid, used before he destroyed an empire. Tay looked down at Sandy, his expression softening instantly, as he brushed a goddess braid away from her tear-stained cheek. "Do not cry over a foolish man who forgot how the world works. You sit here, drink your tea, and let May rub your feet. I have some corporate business to attend to." Tae stood up. He walked down the hallway to the master suite. When he emerged 10 minutes later, the sweet, doting partner was gone. He was wearing a bespoke, midnight black 3-piece suit. His dark hair was swept back flawlessly, and the terrifying, lethal aura of the Wu Syndicate boss was fully radiating from his massive frame. "Ren," Tay commanded, adjusting his expensive silver cufflinks. "Call the head of our legal division. Tell him to meet me in the lobby in 5 minutes with the acquisition files. We are going for a drive." An hour later, Tay walked through the grand glass doors of the most prestigious corporate law firm in Los Angeles. He was flanked by 4 massive men in dark suits, and a silver-haired, incredibly sharp-looking attorney carrying a sleek leather briefcase. The receptionists froze. The junior lawyers in the hallway stopped dead in their tracks, pressing themselves against the walls as the terrifying procession walked directly past the reception desk and straight into the massive glass conference room where the senior partners were having a board meeting. Tay did not knock. He simply pushed the heavy glass doors open. There were 6 senior partners sitting around the mahogany table. David was standing at the front of the room, pointing at a projection screen, right in the middle of a presentation. When David saw Tay, the laser pointer slipped from his hand and clattered loudly against the floor. All the color instantly vanished from his face. "Excuse me, this is a private meeting," the managing partner, an older man with a stern face, demanded, standing up from his leather chair. "Who are you?" Tay ignored David entirely. He walked to the opposite end of the long mahogany table, unbuttoned his suit jacket with a smooth, elegant motion, and sat down in the empty chair at the head of the table. He leaned back, resting his hands casually on the armrests, projecting absolute, undeniable power. "My name is Tay Wu," Tay said, his deep voice carrying effortlessly through the large room. "I am the head of the Wu Enterprise. And I apologize for the interruption, gentlemen, but I am here to offer you a highly lucrative business proposition." The managing partner's stern expression instantly morphed into a look of sheer, greedy shock. Every lawyer in the city knew about the Wu Enterprise. They were a massive, multi-billion-dollar empire with unlimited resources, and securing them as a client was the ultimate crown jewel for any law firm. "Mr. Wu," the managing partner stammered, quickly adjusting his tie. We are honored to have you here. Please, how can our firm assist your enterprise?" "I am currently looking to restructure my entire corporate legal portfolio," Tay explained smoothly, his dark eyes sweeping over the eager faces of the senior partners, before finally landing on a terrified, trembling David. "I am prepared to offer this firm an exclusive, 10-year retainer. The contract is worth roughly $40 million annually. My attorney has the paperwork drafted and ready for your signatures today." The senior partners gasped collectively. It was an unprecedented amount of money. It would make their firm the most powerful in the state. "However," Tay continued, his voice dropping into a dangerous, icy register that made the hair on the back of their necks stand up, "there is one non-negotiable condition for my business." "Anything, Mr. Wu," the managing partner agreed instantly, completely blinded by the dollar signs. "Name your condition." Tay leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the table. He kept his lethal gaze locked entirely on David, watching the arrogant lawyer slowly crumble into dust. "You have a junior partner in your ranks, named David," Tay stated, his voice dripping with absolute disgust. He recently used the vast resources of this prestigious firm to file a frivolous, spiteful lawsuit against a brilliant female engineer, attempting to steal her intellectual property, purely to satisfy his own bruised ego. "I find that kind of petty, pathetic behavior highly insulting to the integrity of the law." The managing partner turned his head, glaring daggers at David. "Is this true, David?" David opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He was completely paralyzed by the terrifying reality of what was happening. "My condition is simple," Tay told the room. "The frivolous lawsuit regarding the pediatric robotic hand is dropped immediately, entirely scrubbed from the legal record. And David is terminated. Not tomorrow, not at the end of the day, right now. You will escort him out of this building, and you will ensure that the legal board investigates his misuse of firm resources for personal vendettas." Tay stood up smoothly, buttoning his suit jacket. "You have exactly 1 hour to send me the confirmation of his termination and the withdrawal of the lawsuit. If you do, the $40 million contract is yours. If you do not, I will spend the next 10 years ensuring that every single corporate client you have leaves this firm for your competitors. Have a wonderful afternoon, gentlemen." Tay turned around and walked out of the glass conference room, his team following silently behind him, leaving absolute, chaotic destruction in his wake. By the time Tay's car pulled back into the underground parking garage of his penthouse, his phone chimed. It was an email from the managing partner. Attached were the official documents proving the lawsuit had been entirely withdrawn with prejudice, alongside a copy of David's immediate termination notice. Tay smiled a small, satisfied smile and slipped the phone into his pocket. When Ty walked back into the penthouse, he found Sandy sitting on the balcony, wrapped in a thick, warm blanket, looking out at the beautiful sunset over the city. The Los Angeles sky was painted in breathtaking shades of gold, pink, and deep purple. He walked over quietly, took off his suit jacket, and wrapped it gently around her shoulders over the blanket. He sat down on the wide lounge chair beside her and pulled her securely against his chest. Sandy leaned her head against his shoulder, letting out a soft sigh. "Dr. Eris called me 20 minutes ago," she whispered, looking up at his handsome face. "He said the lawsuit was suddenly dropped. He said David withdrew it, and the firm issued a formal apology to the university. And, he said an anonymous donor just wired a $5 million endowment directly to my robotics lab to ensure the clinical trials are fully funded for the next 10 years. Sandy reached out, her hand resting over his heart. "You really did not have to do all of that, Tay. I did not do anything violent, if that is what you are worried about." Tay smiled gently, kissing her forehead. "I simply reminded a room full of lawyers about the importance of professional integrity. As for the endowment, consider it an early investment in our daughter's future. I want her to grow up watching her mother change the world." Sandy closed her eyes, a completely overwhelming wave of pure gratitude and unconditional love washing over her. She realized, in that beautiful, golden moment, that she truly did not have to fight the world alone anymore. Tay was not just her partner. He was her absolute shield. He respected her brilliance, protected her peace, and loved her with a fierce, unwavering devotion that healed every single broken piece of her past. "I love you so much," Sandy whispered into the evening breeze, turning her face to press a soft, lingering kiss to his jawline. "You are the best man I have ever known, Tae-woo. I am just a man who finally got the girl of his dreams," Tay murmured, capturing her lips in a sweet, breathtaking kiss as the sun finally dipped below the horizon. The next evening, the penthouse was transformed once again, but this time it was not for a chaotic moving day or a legal war room. It was filled with beautiful pastel balloons, massive bouquets of fresh white and lavender orchids, and the sound of joyous laughter. Diane had organized a lavish, stunning baby shower for Sandy. The living room was packed with the extended Wu family, close friends, and even some of Sandy's colleagues from the engineering lab. Sandy was wearing a breathtaking, flowing lavender maternity gown that made her look like an absolute goddess. She was sitting in a large, comfortable velvet chair in the center of the room, surrounded by a mountain of beautifully wrapped gifts. Diane walked over, holding a small, elegantly wrapped velvet box. Her dark eyes were shining with immense warmth and unshed tears. She knelt down beside Sandy's chair, completely ignoring the expensive fabric of her own dress. "Sandy," Diane said softly, making sure the entire room was quiet enough to hear her. 17 years ago, I watched my tiny, heartbroken son cry on the deck of a cruise ship because a brilliant American girl had to go home. I prayed that one day, he would find someone who loved him as fiercely as he loved others. You have brought so much light, so much healing, and so much absolute joy into our family. You are not just the mother of my grandchild. You are the daughter I always prayed for." Sandy broke down into happy, beautiful tears as Diane opened the velvet box. Inside was a stunning, delicate silver necklace. But instead of a diamond, the pendant was a beautifully crafted, tiny silver gear, perfectly matching the titanium gear Sandy had given Tay all those years ago. Tay walked up behind Sandy's chair, his hands resting gently on her shoulders, his heart completely full as he watched his mother lovingly fasten the necklace around Sandy's neck. As the party continued, and the penthouse filled with the beautiful sound of family and laughter, Sandy looked down at the tiny silver gear resting over her heart. She placed her hand over her round stomach, feeling her baby girl kick happily. She had survived the heartbreak, the neglect, and the toxic shadows of her past. She had found her core memory, and she had finally built the most beautiful, structurally sound, and unconditionally loving life she could ever imagine.